Hello and welcome to Johnny Angel's Ginchy Stuff here at my museum and collectible store. And we're here to talk about music. I'm talking about old and new. And this is my partner right here, Mr. Byron Nash.
How's it going, everybody?
And what I like to do today is we're gonna kick some things around. And first thing we want to talk about are gigs. Okay. So let me ask you a question about your very, very, very first gig.
A lot of people don't know this. So back in, I'm not going to date myself. I guess it's kind of well anyway. But I had a 45 of Joan Jett. I love rock and roll. I mean, I was obsessed. I mean, put grooves into the record. And big song at the time. And I was at school and I was goofing off with my buddy in class. And the teacher was like, "What's so funny? What's so funny you can't share with the class?" And we're like, "Oh, we were just talking about Joan Jett." We weren't. We were just like trying not to get in trouble. She's like, "Oh, if it's so funny, then how about you perform the song at the assembly later?" And we were like, "Ha, whatever." And sure enough, we're at the assembly, and like there's a little segment in there where they called our names out and brought us up, and we lip synced "I Love Rock and Roll" in front of the whole school, and I was frozen in fear until I started singing. Until I started like performing, and that was my first true performance.
I love it. And you were Joan Jett.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
What was your first?
My very first gig, I'm talking professional gig,
Yeah.
and that would be the very first time I sang was in church. I sang Jesus Loves Me in the church choir, right?
Okay.
But the first time I was as a musician, our very first gig, paid gig, was at the Bellevue YMCA in
wow.
Bellevue. It was a dance, right? And we made $3 a guy, right? And I spent $2 of those dollars on my main squeeze, who I later married, Mary Lou.
Oh, there you
We
go.
walked up to the Pizza Village, right? And I spent $2 on pizza and Cokes, and I still have the first dollar framed in the museum.
You know what? That's great. What was it about performing that made you say, "I want to do this"?
There's a lot. Ego
Yeah.
has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
You know, being on stage, getting to be known. You know, probably one of the biggest things as a kid trying to fit in. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And when you're trying to fit in, one of the easiest ways for me to fit in was either sports or music. And I played a lot of sports, and I'm paying for it now. And but the music part always was the icebreaker for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I was able to talk about the fact that I met so and so, the fact that I sang with so and so. You know, and to me that was an icebreaker.
Though, do you think that was more because that was after your career was more established that you could say you did those things?
Yeah.
What was the initial thing that was it just like I like the attention, I love the music? Was it a combination of all those things?
I think the attention, just about any performer, if they're doing it live, the attention it's got to be up there.
Yeah.
You know? But I think the main thing when I was doing it was because I could do something that some of my other buddies couldn't do.
Yeah.
You know, and you grow up in a neighborhood and everybody was good at what they did, you know.
Yeah.
My junior was a better baseball player
That's
than
true.
I was, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it came to the singing part, in our neighborhood, I could sing a little bit. So I got to sing with some of the cats that didn't know they were going to be stars. I mean, this group practiced on the porch next to one of our dear friends, and they were the Marcells. And got to meet Freddie and all those guys before they were stars. And so every now and then I'd like to sing with them. I said, "Can I sing?" And Freddie would reach in his pocket and pull out a quarter and say, "Hey, Red, run down Lou's and Mary's and get me a pop."
Yeah.
You know, but that was like, but it was recognized because I could say, I sang with Fred, you know.
Yeah, interesting. So, speaking of like performing live and getting attention from fans and girls and everything, one of my favorite groups, Beatles. Tell me about this Beatles picture behind you.
This is kind of cool. This Beatles picture up here, back in the day when the Beatles first broke into, when they invaded the United States, right? Everything was Beatles. It was in comic books. It was in teen magazines. It was, but in the back of the teen magazines, they used to have this ad that would say, "Send 25 cents or 50 cents, and you tape them to the card, and you would mail it into this number, and they will send you the Beatles posters, which are these up here." So you tape them. Imagine doing that today. But we
get
tape
your
these
money
two
back.
quarters on an envelope
Yeah.
and send it in. And a couple weeks later, in the mail, I got this, and I still have the envelope for it, which is kind of cool.
Interesting.
And it was 50 cents at the time. And now you look at them, if you could find one, they're going for hundreds of dollars just to
Wow.
find them. You know what I mean? But it's kind of a keepsake thing. And I wasn't a Beatles fan at first.
No?
You know what I mean? I was such a soul guy in rhythm and blues that the Beatles to me were not as great. Where some of my friends were like, everything had to do with the
Yeah.
Beatles, you know. But what about you? Did the Beatles have any impact on you?
They did. In two different ways. So my mom was a Beatles fan, but it was like all the early kind of really short songs.
Yes.
And so she had all those records. So because I would plow through her record collection, I listened to everything. So I was very familiar with that. And then like the movie like Help and all the little movies and stuff that came along with it, that had impact on me. But it wasn't musically until later that it had true impact on me with like songwriting, recording. Like I'm a big recording nerd, so I really love the processes of how they did a lot of that stuff. So I have sort of that early influence, but then later I became like more a musician about it, and that's when they truly impacted me.
And you know what was really cool about that is that I loved the Beatles for a lot of reasons because I learned to love them and I respected them later.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to talk about right now is our guest tonight is a dear friend of mine who, if there is anybody that I know that knows how to talk about the Beatles. I mean, Pete was one of those guys who was also a soul man. I'm talking about Pete Hewlett, by the way. And this next segment, we're going to introduce Pete, and we're going to talk a little bit about Pete Hewlett, and I'll tell you that in just a second.
Looking forward to meeting him.
Jack in the Box.
Welcome to Jack in the Box. This week, I'm going to talk about an old buddy of mine, Mr. Ed Solomon. Now, Ed was a musician. He's a book writer and author. He is a Pittsburgh figure and a dear friend. This book it gets into depth about what was happening in the music scene late 50s all through the 60s. And what we're talking about, people like Lou Christie, Bobby Vinton, how about Jimmy Beaumont and the Skyliners, the Jaggers. We're actually in here once or twice, right? And what I'd like to show you is how the Pittsburgh scene grew when from the doo-wop era through the hippie era, through the leather jackets into the bell-bottom pants, right? It's all about us right here, the Pittsburgh music scene. Mr. Ed Solomon, another one of my Pittsburgh icons. And my partner Byron, let me introduce you to Pete Hewlett.
Pete, pleasure to meet
Byron,
you.
pleasure.
Thanks for coming on
Heard
the
a
show
lot
today.
about you. Pleasure, man.
Same.
Pleasure.
Pete and I have done a lot of talking in this very museum about our past and about music and so on, and we've performed here together quite a few times. And there's a lot of history here, but the thing I want to talk about today is Pete. Okay. Now, one of the questions I have to ask you, man, before we get into anything else was, I know where you started, McKee's Rocks, right?
Right.
You're from the Rocks, right?
Right.
If I asked you one group that it was going to make you say, oh, that's what made me do this, Jack, who would it be?
Probably the Beatles.
I kind of knew that.
But I mean, I'm looking at this, and it's like I have this album.
Yeah.
You know? I have an older brother, so it's like I was aware of Chuck Berry, and when the Stones came out and the Beatles came out, I was like, wait a minute, these guys are doing Chuck Berry, they're doing the Beatles, they're doing Buddy Holly, they're doing the Everly Brothers, you know. So
Yeah, absolutely. And growing up in the music business, we've talked about this quite a few times, but can you remember any of the places that you got your start singing?
it's funny because I just did a benefit in McKee's Rocks at the VFW, which is on Chartres Avenue. John knows where that is. And my very first gig, because I remember it, my mother had the clipping out of the McKee's Rocks Gazette, I believe, was the Quality Cleaners, which is like 3 blocks down on this same street. So I think that's the first.
And that was a neat building.
Yeah.
It was,
Well, it was a parking lot. Parking lot to a cleaners, but, you know, people lined up. You know, it was like exciting. I guess.
I love it. But, you know, a lot of the clubs that we all played, but especially you, there was one in McKee's Rocks you pretty much did a lot. You remember what it was?
Psychedelic.
That's it.
Yeah, Psychedelic Lounge. Oh yeah.
And at some point we got to talk about our first meeting when we were actually in the tea tournament, which we got to get
Battle
to.
of the Bands, sure.
Question for you. So when you got started, what was it about the beat? So was that like the first group that just made you say I love music, or was that the first group that made you say I want to play music?
No, because I was into music prior to that. I loved Buddy Holly. My first record I bought was Peggy Sue. So, but I didn't have thoughts about being in a band at that time. But when the Beatles came out, it was kind of, I was 13 years old at the time, and JFK had been assassinated. It was kind of a strange time in the country, especially for, I think, kids my age, you know, like 9 and up. maybe. I mean, for everybody, of course.
Yeah.
But and that just presented something that was kind of, because I was going to be a baseball player. That was my biggest thing, was to play Major League Baseball. But anyway, when that happened, it was like a whole new cultural change.
Yeah.
That kind of like kids gravitated towards, and it was just. Wow, I could do this. Okay, girls screaming, make millions of dollars, nice suits, cool boots.
It's a good selling point. I can see that being all right,
somewhere. And the hair, the whole thing. It was, pretty much a complete package. So it was like.
So once you started gigging, did you know what kind of music you wanted to play? Was there a direction that you naturally went?
The first time I was playing, we backed up. There was 4 girls who had a group at our school, and we did a dance. So it was myself, the drummer from my first band, a bass player, and we were doing the Shirelles and the Cookies and all kind of that kind of stuff. Of course, the girl singing group. But it was like all this music was kind of intertwined because the Beatles were doing that stuff too. They were doing Mr. Postman. They were doing Baby It's You. So it was all kind of intertwined. So I was aware of what the music was, and the way they presented it was like for 4 guys who could kind of play.
Yeah.
Put it together and go for it.
Awesome. Awesome.
I want our listening audience to understand something about Pete. Pete is a local legend here, but he's also a national legend. I don't mean to embarrass you.
Can I get this backstory?
Pete had records out several times under different names, different bands. If you could just run through that list for me. Peter's Piper's the start.
That was the first one. Yeah, that was. We had a record called Airplane. That was right around the Battle of the Bands, the T tournament.
Phillips Records.
Phillips Mercury. I was in a band called Sweet Lightning.
Yes.
We were on RCA Records. We did an album. I did a local things under the name of Sweet Pete. Sweet Lightning after that, and did a couple singles, and then I moved out of the city for a while. I joined a band in Cleveland called Euclid Beach Band. A good friend of mine had a song called "There's No Surf in Cleveland," which had local success. And from that, met different people. I met Eric Carmen.
Yes.
And I was asked to be in his band, and it's just like anything. You meet people, it snowballs. You meet this one, So I bounced around, and then ended up in New York. A good friend of mine, Sid McGinnis, who we played in Sweet Lightning together. He had moved to New York, and I got a gig with Carly Simon up there as a guitarist, vocal, and stayed in New York and did a couple auditions, and had a band called Novo Combo with Michael Shreve, who was a drummer with Santana at Woodstock.
Absolutely.
Wow.
To this day, we're like looking to put stuff out again because somebody's making money on, 50 cents, $50, whatever. Somebody's doing it. So we're gonna like reissue some things. But, and like I said, it's in any industry. It's like you work, you meet this person, meet that. They like you. You do a good job. You show up on time. That kind of thing. So. Out of the Novo Combo thing, I met Mark Rivera, who was Billy Joel's sax player, and at the time I was up there doing some things, and Billy had put out the Innocent Man album.
Yes.
So I was he said, I actually come back to Pittsburgh, because Novo Combo split up. We had some problems with management, that sort of thing. And I got a call and said, would you be interested in singing? I was like, okay.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was probably, that led to a lot of really great things for me. Just different people that I sang with. I got to do a Broadway show, not be in it, but do the album Starlight Express with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and
nice.
Just work with various artists, Joe Jackson and Julian Lennon, and it's just there in the industry. So
I have a close-up picture of you. And you're in the background here, and right in front of it is a guy by the name of Paul McCartney and singing in front of you, and you're doing background.
Kind of like,
Wow.
Yeah, that was
crazy.
That was things I'd done with Billy were great. I mean, just working with him, he's such an incredible songwriter, number one, and performer. I thought Wooden Top was we did the Soviet Union tour in 1987, and that was like just spectacular, the whole thing. I hadn't worked for Billy. I worked with him from 1984 to '89, and then in 2008, I got a call. Would you be interested in singing on the last play at Shea? I was like, what?
Baseball.
Yeah. So I said, absolutely, man. So yeah, I mean the array of stars that were on that show were just incredible. And McCartney was the last. He closed it down. So it was great.
I just love it. Love the history, man.
I'm lucky.
So we have this. We have this segment that we do. It's kind of like rapid fire questions, and kind of run through these different things. So the first thing that comes to your mind, let us know what it is.
Not too quick.
Something old.
Okay. Me and Jack.
All right,
Why
Jack.
don't all old guys like grow these little
You
hats?
notice that?
Hat. I don't
Because
know.
we're
Is that a
losing it
thing?
up there, so
I guess so. I did trim my ears before I got here.
Nice.
It's the Irish thing. I have to do mine every day. It's
Yeah.
something new, Pete.
Something new. I guess a lot. Music-wise, some of the artists, and it's like I was thinking, when you think new, it's like, hey, that's 4 years old already.
Yeah.
A little bit. I heard a guy the other day, Sam Henshaw. He's an English kid. He's kind of reminds me of John Legend a little bit. He writes. He's very good. And I just checked out some of his stuff. Guy named James Morrison, he's been out a couple years. I can't understand why that kid wasn't big. Jamie Cullum is another one who I like. He's kind of like Sinatra, piano player, but has an edge, rock thing. And, but for the most part, I still gravitate toward Stevie Wonder, Beatles, Earth, Wind and Fire, listen to that stuff.
Yep.
How about something treasured? It could be a memory. It could be a
I was
thing,
just going to say memories, man.
Yeah.
Memories, tangible things. My Bill Mazeroski autographed baseball. Maz was my hero, and I had a story. It was like I was driving home one day, and I'm listening to the radio, and they come on and said, Maz is going to be at Monroeville Sporting Goods, whatever. It's like I'm headed toward McKees Rocks. It's like I pulled into, I don't know what the store was. I knew they had baseballs. Got one, drove all the way out to Monroeville.
Nice.
And I'm like, in my,
Absolutely.
I guess 30s or whatever. It's like, wow.
And something about Pete Hewlett that's true.
Something that people don't know. Hey, let the people know. This is an opportunity to share something, part of your history, keep the legacy going. Something true.
God, it's all not true. This is all crap.
We gotcha.
Yeah. Gee.
Stumped you on that
I
one.
hate this one, huh?
I know.
I thought you were going to say something like something.
Yeah, give me something.
Yeah, you were wearing those hats. Why did you wear those hats at the tea tournament?
That's old. No.
Oh, it's
But no, it's funny. I saw a picture of the Beatles. I didn't even notice it, but the guy who was our drummer in the band, he was kind of like, he would lead us. Hey, we should do that. We did that. That kind of thing. And I just saw this picture not too long ago, and it's them with straw hats on. It's like, son of a gun, that's where I got that idea, man. But
I tease you about that, but you were so unique in the way you guys did things, man. It was like we'd all stand there and say, these cats are something, man. You won. Of course, we all went home, and you didn't.
It was like, it was like back then. Everybody had to have a gimmick or something.
Yeah, a little bit of a shtick.
Yeah, I remember the year before. I think it was Robin and the Hoods. When they were like dressed like Robin Hood.
That's it, the band was,
Yeah.
Speaking of the Beatles,
Yeah.
you want to jam on a Beatles song?
Sure, man. It'd be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Byron's Bodega. This week, I'm sharing with you this guitar. It's interesting how I got into it. I kind of learned how to play electric live on this one, but there was a big resurgence of like 7-string guitar playing and rock music in, I don't know, the 90s. And I kind of went along with it, and I got my first 7-string, this Schecter. This guitar I was in a band called Sporadic, and it was like my main axe for years. So you have this extra low D string. This guitar was crazy. I was into Candaria big time. But the most interesting thing about this guitar is that I actually tried out for Limp Bizkit with it in DC. They were doing like a nationwide search for a guitar player, and at all the what was it, Guitar Centers. And I drove to DC, stayed in my car overnight, and then got to try out for them the next day. And it was funny because people were getting cut from the line like really aggressively. And when I went in, I'm like, just play yourself, just do what you got to do. And I started playing because you only had like 30 seconds. People were coming out in like 2 seconds. And I stopped playing because I thought I went over the time, and they told me to continue to play. So I was in the room longer than most people. So when I came out of the room, everyone's like, you know, who's this dude? And the thing was, that was just a moment of like being, I don't know, another like notch on the belt. Like, even if I don't get it, at least I tried. So that's why this guitar means a lot, because it was the first time I was brave on that level.
Little darling, it's been a cold, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say, it's alright. Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Little darling, the smiles returning to their faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's alright. It's alright. It's alright. Alright. Yeah, man. Cool. All right.
Stay tuned for our next episode